Hi, my name is Charlie Olson.
Hello, my name is John Duffy.
Welcome to the Environment TV. This is our weekly news show.
In the short time that we have with you right now,
there are more environmental topics than we can cover.
But we would like to touch on topics that are most interest to you.
And it's possible to do that, but only if we have your help.
So, if there's a particular story of interest to you,
contact us.
Or research and write about it.
Or Skype. Or send us an audio news report from wherever you are.
We hope to shed some light on many environmental issues.
And hope that you can join us.
So
please, sit back now and watch this week's weekly news show. Thank you.
In a report by Peter Elliskew, on August 20th in Bridgewater, New Jersey, at Footprint Power's headquarters, several groups held a sit-in to protest against Footprint Power's proposed gas-fired power plant in Salem, Massachusetts.
We're going to be sitting down in the headquarters of Footprint Power today, which is the company behind the proposed Salem gas plant in Massachusetts. What we're hoping to do is discourage the financing of this project, of the Footprint gas plant, and we're hoping to just draw attention to the dangers of natural gas. We know that natural gas does hurt people. It hurts communities that are impacted through fracking, who are having their water poisoned by a mix of chemicals that the industry won't make public, and it's already hurting people through the extreme weather patterns being caused by climate crisis, which are only going to get worse if we continue to build new fossil fuel infrastructure such as the proposed Footprint gas plant.
My name is Jessica Wohlander, and I'm an intern for Food and Water Watch. I'm an organizing intern.
And what is your specific task at the present time?
As an organizing intern, my main responsibility is doing outreach to CSAs, which are community-supported agriculture.
And can you explain that a little further?
Sure. Community-supported agriculture is when a group of people or a community come together and they build a relationship with a farmer, and they pay in advance of the season for vegetables. So they support the farmer before the season starts financially, and in exchange they get vegetables every week delivered to the community.
Are you going to the CSEA place itself, and then what do you do?
Yeah, each of us have gone to visit a CSA, I think, me and Sophia and Michael, who are the other interns here this summer. But what we do is we usually set up a time to go and visit them when they're distributing their vegetables, and we really just chat with people as they're coming through. There have been a few CSAs who have requested more formal presentations, but mostly because of the nature of a CSA, there's kind of a constant flow of people coming through, so we kind of catch them on their way in and ask if they're interested in signing a petition, ask if they know about fracking. It's a balance of educating people and engaging people and seeing how we can get them involved in this movement to ban fracking in New York.
And which areas have you actually visited?
We've been all over the place. We've been down into Staten Island, we've been up to Queens, we've been out to Astoria and in Brooklyn and all over Manhattan, uptown, the Bronx, downtown. We've got the whole city covered, I think.
And what do you find the reaction of the members?
People have been very enthusiastic. One of the reasons we're working with CSAs is because we thought this was a group of people who already are interested in the environment and the local food movement. They're interested in the livelihoods of farmers. And they're interested in keeping their food safe and healthy. So they're already prone to being against fracking, since fracking threatens all of those things I just mentioned. So they generally are very enthusiastic about helping us to get fracking banned in New York.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the people concerning?
I think it's a great thing that everybody should get involved with. If you're not a member, you should think about being one. It's a great opportunity to really connect to local farmers in your community and have access to lovely fresh vegetables.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Greenberg. I work as a summer intern for Food and Water Watch. And one of my primary responsibilities this summer has been to reach out to and get to know and establish relationships with the local Democratic groups throughout Manhattan and the Bronx. I've reached out to about 20 or 30 groups, and I've established solid contact with over 10 of them. And it's really been amazing seeing just how much passion and just how much interest there is about fracking among the members of these groups. They are knowledgeable already, and they really feel as though they don't need to be convinced about anything, but rather are ready to start fighting right now. So one of the largest groups I met with was the Manhattan Young Democrats, for example, and they already have an environmental subcommittee, and that subcommittee has already taken on fracking as one of its key issues. This group, Manhattan Young Democrats, even attended the most recent NIAF meeting, which stands for New Yorkers Against Fracking, and they are considering becoming an official member of that coalition in the coming weeks. I also met with this very interesting group called the Chelsea Reform Democratic Club, and that is an absolutely enormous club based, as the name implies, in Chelsea. They get over 100 people at their regular meetings and over 400 people at some of their largest meetings. And this club is at least as passionate, at least as committed, at least as devoted as any other group to the fight against fracking. Just one example of how dedicated they are is that the person I met with from there, RJ Jordan, had even gotten arrested protesting against fracking, and specifically against a fracking pipeline that goes through New York City. Not all the Democratic groups are quite as big or quite as committed, but they are, in every case, very, very concerned about fracking, very interested in how it could affect the water, the air quality, the climate, etc., and really interested in getting more involved. In fact, even one of the more conservative Democratic clubs that I met with is the sort of old school, sort of clubby, sort of exclusive, sort of insidery, a little bit less egalitarian type of Democratic club. Even there, the person we met with was genuinely concerned about the impacts of fracking that, could be felt literally, whether across the world by people who will be affected by the changing climate, or right here in New York City by people whose water supply could potentially be affected, by people whose local environment could be protected, by people whose second homes upstate could be impacted. So these meetings have been a really inspiring way to get a good overview of where Manhattan political activists stand on fracking, and it's been very, very reassuring to see that they are just as devoted to this fight as even some of the most devoted fracking activists. Over the coming weeks, we'll be staying in touch with these groups about several different things. We're going to advertise our anti-fracking rallies directed at Governor Cuomo to these groups. We don't have a single rally scheduled yet because they get scheduled very last minute because we don't know Cuomo's schedule in advance, but as soon as Cuomo events come up, we plan rallies right outside, and we'll be keeping these Democratic clubs in the loop about these rallies, and they will be sending out emails to their members, calling their members, etc. And hopefully a pretty decent number of activists from these Democratic clubs will begin coming to Cuomo rallies. Additionally, we're telling them about our Fracking Reality bus tour, and we're hoping to have some of the Democratic groups be represented on this tour. We're telling them about our Frack Down, which is an event in October. We're still trying to figure out exactly how that will look. And besides that, we don't see the relationship with them as, just us using them in order to have more bodies at our events. We're really trying to nurture collaborative, long-term, deep, significant relationships with these groups in which we foster a genuine feeling of commitment from them to the cause of banning fracking, and that will really be effective over the course not of weeks or months but of years in having a really strong, broad, inclusive grassroots movement, really a movement opposing fracking in New York State, and that is the type of thing we need to win these fights.
And are you reaching out also to the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island?
Staten Island we've been in touch with prior to this summer to a significant extent, and my boss Eric is doing lots of work around engaging those groups, and 2 weeks from now I'll be meeting actually with a Staten Island group and discussing fracking with them. And then Bronx and Queens is being spearheaded primarily by Sophia. I think working with the Democratic groups has been a really, I think strategically it's really valuable for us because these people they're sort of just the type of people we need, because not only are they interested in environmental issues, they are people who are very knowledgeable and very sort of sharp when it comes to politics, because very often people who are passionate about the environment aren't the most knowledgeable about the ins and outs of politics, particularly local politics or state politics. But these people have both a passion for the environment and the sort of deep knowledge of the regional political scene, meaning that they know who they probably know their state legislators in person, they know their city council members, they understand how the office of the governor works, they understand the nuances and details about how legislation goes through, they understand both the theoretical and the sort of more state-specific, person-specific idiosyncrasies about environmental politics. So these are really amazing people to work with, and just meeting with them has been a pleasure for me because these people have really sharp minds about New York State politics, and it's been truly an honor getting to hear their own opinions about it and having them share that with me.
And what would it look like if you were at the meeting? If I was at the meeting where you are you at a table presenting an idea about the energy problems, the fracking problems, doing question and answering, or are you also doing petitioning, showing movies, doing movie screenings, or anything else?
Sure. So these meetings take all forms. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. So sometimes it is a movie screening, let's say a Gasland screening or something of that nature, and the entire club is invited. Sometimes it's just a presentation given by one of us to the club. Sometimes it's a meeting with the club's executive board. So far, all of my meetings, I've had about 7 or 8, have been with one key activist from the club. So that's generally either the club president or the club member who takes charge, whether officially or informally, on environmental issues. And yeah, we work with clubs to do things in the way that they're accustomed to and that's comfortable for them.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jill Wiener, and I work with Catskill Citizens for Safe Energy.
And I'm Bruce Ferguson with Catskill Citizens for Safe Energy.
So we're an all grassroots organization, all run by volunteers. We don't have an office, we don't have a paid staff. We basically work off of our own computers on our dining room tables. And
where are you guys located in the state of New York?
well, I live in Sullivan County, so that's where I'm located, but we have volunteers pretty much everywhere, primarily in the Delaware River Basin, though.
We organized 6 years ago around the kitchen table because there was a lot of gas leasing going on in this area and people were alarmed. No one knew much about fracking back then, but we knew that having oil wells, gas wells come in rural area could be very disruptive. We didn't even know initially that there were chemicals in fracking fluid because New York State Department of Environmental Conservation told us there were no chemicals used in fracking. Things were that bad. We assumed in 2008 that fracking would come, and we're just saying, please just don't store the wastewater in open pits in the pasture. At least put it in tanks. We were told by the DEC, we're not going to make that a requirement. We had no idea how successful we could be, and when I say we, I include the hundreds of grassroots organizations throughout the state that spontaneously popped up in different areas and organized around this issue. The big greens were not there at the outset. The Sierra Club, who's a great ally these days, at that point was taking $26 million from Chesapeake Energy, which had more gas leases than anyone else in New York State. Other organizations were calling shale gas, frack gas, a bridge fuel to the future. This was, from day one, a grassroots movement that have gotten us to where we are today.
So, there are still some, I would say, environmental, but I'll use that term sort of loosely, organizations that are saying that bridge fuel line. Specifically organizations like Environmental Defense Fund. And we just, from this whole time, it's been the grassroots really informing the grass tops of what the real truth was. We ferreted out, from real scientists who were doing the work and real investigations that were going on through independent journalism and through really great reporting in ProPublica and the New York Times, what was really happening going on the ground. And I think that all of those grassroots groups and individuals fighting on fracking really turned the tide and turned a lot of the big green organizations, opened their eyes on this issue.
Roger Downs, who was with the Sierra Club, was one of the very first people in the entire state to organize on fracking. He was in the leadership of this from the day one, and his organization, he's brought, I think, the Sierra Club to a very positive place now. He's taken major initiatives on this issue all along the way. And NRDC is now very helpful. In fact, we're partnering with NRDC on several local initiatives. They have resources and staff that we don't have, and they bring a lot to the fight that we cannot bring. And same with Sierra Club. They're doing just a tremendous job these days. When you say Environmental Defense Fund, I think you want to put literally scare quotes around environmental in their name. They've been pretty dreadful on this to this day.
Yeah, I would also give a shout out, if we're shouting out, since it seems like
Shout
we are,
out.
but like Earthworks, who does
Again, absolutely.
unbelievable work on the ground in communities across the country where people are living with fracking, and I would put scarecrows around the word living, because you really can't have any quality of life when you have drilling in your backyard or drilling infrastructure.
And what would be your present goals at this time? Let's say
Well,
6 months, a year.
Speaking just as an individual, and I'll let Jill answer for herself as an individual. Let me say, first of all, we make decisions in the organization by consensus. Our goals are clear: to move away from the threat of fracking in New York State to renewable energy. That is our stated mission as an organization. That's what we intend to do. Personally, I'm spending the next 26 days or 25 or 24 days of my life trying to get Zephyr Teachout elected, because I know she will implement the programs and strategies that we've been calling for since day one, and then maybe I can get my life back, you know.
I'm with Bruce. I want my life back, so I want Zephyr Teachout and Tim Wu in Albany. And I'm doing everything I can on a personal level to help them get there. And that said, I think as an organization, our goal is to have a ban of fracking in New York, but that doesn't mean that we're going to rest. We're going to ban fracking in New York. We're going to work on infrastructure problems. We're going to move to renewable energy. And I see it like a domino. We take New York and we start pushing back, and those dominoes fall across the country. Fossil fuel is regressive, and we just don't need it. There's a much better way. There's a solution. It's called the Solutions Project.
Yeah, beyond fracking and beyond renewables, one of the national issues that we're working on is opposition to exporting liquefied natural gas overseas. The gas industry claims we need this fracked gas for energy independence. BS. They have submitted applications for licenses to export 42% of gas from the United States to other companies where it will fuel cheap products and so on that will compete with American products. That's the reason why companies like Dow and Alcoa have called for a prohibition on the export of natural gas. These may be strange bedfellows for us, but we agree entirely that we shouldn't frack up America so China can get cheap gas and throw cheap products back at us and put Americans out of work here that are in manufacturing.
Is there anything further you'd like to say to our fellow New Yorkers at the moment?
Vote Zephyr Teachout.
Vote Zephyr Teachout and Tim Wu.
Okay.
That's a personal message, not an organization message.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe for your family, which is if you're a pilot, is not that impressive, but I do know how to throw myself off some cliffs. If you know any 8-year-olds and you're asking them to learn, don't send them to school where it's all worksheets and stress, because there's no way they're going to learn math unless they get time to run around, unless they get time for art.
My name is Bruce Ferguson. I'm delighted to interview you for Environment TV. Zephyr Teachout, running for governor of the state of New York. And let's start at the beginning, the very, very basics. Are you concerned about climate change?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned. We already have it. It's already happening. And the question is, how much and how much damage is it going to cause? I think everybody had a wake-up call with Sandy. But before that, it's been an issue for a long time. I should tell you that I started when I was 18 years old. I had a job working for California Public Interest Research Group, going door to door, talking about climate change back then.
Wow.
Just the seeds of it at the time. There was just a beginning of an awareness. But now we know the science. The science is in. It's a serious, it's already happening. And the question is, how can we slow it? How can we stop it? And then how can we make sure that the people who are responsible for it are paying for it instead of the most vulnerable populations?
Are we doing enough at the state and national level to combat climate change?
We're not even, no. I think everybody knows the answer to that question. we still have people in public office who are acting as if it doesn't exist or it isn't that serious. It is deadly serious, as we know. And so we need to aggressively move right now away from fossil fuels. That's our job. That's our job for our present and our job for our future. That means that, and this is a place where New York can really lead, and that's exciting. I have been talking with folks at the Solutions Project, looked at Stanford Professor Mark Jacobson's proposal for New York State. New York State can go towards 100% renewable. And as governor, it's one of my first acts would not just be to ban fracking, which we can talk about, but to actually move away from fossil fuels in general as our energy plan and move towards solar. We can have so many more solar farms, wind, starting with offshore wind, and water.
One area where you seem to disagree with Andrew Cuomo is on fracking. He's been in office for 4 years. He has yet to take a leadership role in this debate. He says he's waiting for the science. That's one fact. The fact that he's taken $1 million from pro-fracking interests is another fact. Is it possible that the money is obscuring the science for Andrew Cuomo?
Well, that's the only explanation that I can make sense of. Because if you care about the people of New York and the future of New York, you would ban fracking right now. The science is in. Hydrofracking has devastated the areas in this country that it has come to. It's extremely dangerous for our health, for our water, I've looked at the compendium of all the scientific research, and I don't think there's any questions anymore about the science.
You're not waiting for any more science.
I'm not waiting for any more science. And the other thing is on the politics. It's New Yorkers have been brave, extraordinary fighters against hydrofracking. At one point, 4 years ago, I think many people would have said it's terrible, but it's coming to New York. There's nothing you can do to stop it. But this movement in New York, it's an untold story about this powerful movement in New York, which has actually stopped hydrofracking. And they haven't just stopped it, they've also been reaching out to people in New York State, and the polls are shifting.
Yeah.
You now see that a recent poll in the Southern Tier, a majority of people are opposed to hydrofracking. So every day, as more and more people realize that hydrofracking isn't a jobs plan, it's a toxic plan, it's an unsafe plan, we're seeing the population shift. So the best explanation I have is that Andrew Cuomo has been swayed by his big money donors, because otherwise he would come out with a hydrofracking ban right away.
Okay, and that is the chief argument you hear in defense of, well, you hear two things really. Well, you hear we need the gas, and there's evidence we don't because the industry plans to export half of it overseas. And you hear about jobs. And people say if you ban hydrofracking, you're going to be taking jobs away from New Yorkers. What's your response to that?
Well, I had my policy team look into this, and it's just not true. The evidence is not actually that good that hydrofracking brings jobs. They're bad jobs. It's a short-term plan. In fact, I think it's like 1 out of every 800 or maybe 700 jobs is in that industry, whereas 1 out of every 6 jobs is in health or education. That's the direction we should be going. But I'll tell you the jobs plan. I have a jobs plan building on the Solutions Project, and the jobs plan is to invest in renewables. That's good jobs. It's long-term jobs. It's healthy jobs. It's safe jobs. And that's what New York needs. And if we become the leader in renewables, it's not just people from all over the country. People from all over the world will flock to New York and model what they're doing on what we're doing here.
So do you contend then that renewable energy, build out of renewable energy will produce more jobs than fracking?
There's no question about it in my mind. Renewable energy produces more jobs. Fracking is a false promise and a dangerous promise.
You have said that you'd like to see New York move to 100% renewable energy in the coming decades. Is that really feasible with the technology we have today?
Yes. There's Mark Jacobson, who's a Stanford professor, has looked into this and has a plan for 100% renewables in New York State. And as governor, one of the first things I do is do a feasibility study. based on Mark Jacobson and the Solutions Project. And so we can start moving as quickly as possible towards renewables. I think we can't afford not to. The costs of climate change in the short and long term, and then the costs of every other source of energy are too high. And the opportunity with renewables is so great that it's one of the great opportunities I see, and I would be so proud to be governor during a time where we moved towards the 100% renewable solution.
Even though fracking is on hold in New York State, many New Yorkers are already being impacted adversely by fracking. We have people who live near toxic compressor stations. Pipelines are planned for cutting up the state all over through state forests, through wetlands, through residential communities. We have toxic, explosive Bakken crude moving down the Hudson River and by rail in unsafe rail cars. We have, and this is the most extraordinary thing of all, we have toxic drilling waste that is so dangerous. Some of it has been refused by West Virginia, yet it's being imported and dumped in New York State.
No, this is a position that Governor Cuomo has failed to take leadership on. There's no excuse for the toxic waste being allowed in our state. It shows that Governor Cuomo is not actually paying attention to the health of our citizens. And it's an area where he can take real leadership and hasn't. And as governor, I would take leadership. There's already a bill to keep the waste out. I would aggressively support that bill, push it through. Because I've talked to people who live near the compressor stations. I've talked to people who've experienced. I've talked to people from Pennsylvania who've experienced what it's like when hydrofracking comes to their own communities, and they've invited me to actually come visit Pennsylvania. And I hope to do that in the next 3 weeks, because we need, as New Yorkers, we need to understand that this is a real threat to our health. And it's not just, as you said, it's not just the hydrofracking, but the waste that comes from it.
What is your vision of upstate New York if it does not include fracking? People in the southern tier, there are depressed counties up here. You're in a very depressed county right now. What can you offer them instead of fracking?
Well, we should be investing in renewables. In Sullivan County alone, there are 44 different hydro sites that have already been identified that we could start building on immediately. That's jobs. Solar farms are jobs. Agriculture is also really important, and I'm a big promoter and supporter of value add in agriculture, and also connecting the upstate agriculture to the cities, making sure we have better transit systems and distribution systems. But I'll tell you, it actually relates to hydrofracking again, is that fracking is actually putting a damper on agricultural development upstate. And agro-tourism, because if you own a farm or you want to invest in something that might be an agro-tourist destination and you're not sure if hydrofracking is coming, you can't invest in that because it could be worthless 2 years later. So Governor Cuomo's silence in this area is actually slowing economic growth.
This is Ken Gale for Environment TV Weekly News. When the air or water are clean, thank an environmentalist. If not, become one. Enough said.